Hi. Um, this is such a sacred moment in time. It's there's so much happening in the world, but there's also so much happening in this week. For me, this week is a significant transition week. And part of that transition week is that it's moving from the first month of summer in the northern hemisphere, winter in the southern hemisphere. It's that very first week moving into the next month. I know that sounds like a lot, but stay with it for a moment. In the northern hemisphere, the map is somewhat like this. This is a wonderful illustration that Nellie had put together. This is the mineral kingdom, and the middle band is the plant kingdom. The last band is the animal kingdom. And there are thousands, I think roughly 6,000 acknowledged forms of crystals in 400,000 different plant species. And the animal species, well, they're not exactly sure how many animals there really are, because the definition of what an animal is can go right down to a microorganism. And there is some evidence that bacteria have existences that are like the animal kingdom. But just say that there's mineral, plant, animal. So in the 3 months of summer, it goes from mineral kingdom, that's number one girl. And it also corresponds to those parts inside of you that are the bones. And it's also the part of you that has that instinctual desire to hold together the family. Because the very first place we open up happens to be the family function. Inside of that, you need to eventually be able to go into a wider diameter. Minerals feed plants. Plants feed animals. In my opinion, the animal kingdom, to my knowledge, 100% of them are the recipients of what the plant kingdom does. There might be animals that eat animals, but they're usually eating animals that ate plants. All of these plants, they use minerals. So the minerals are basically the expandability and the mobility. You can see how the mineral kingdom, the earth, doesn't move very fast. But the plant kingdom, in all of its broad diversity, occupies one particular domain that's a very, very thin domain. If you think about where the plant kingdom is, it's obviously right on top of the mineral kingdom and extends. Some of the deepest roots may go 100 meters into the earth by some plants. And then some plants may go 100 meters high, if that's accurate. So there's a very narrow, thin place. If you look at the diameter of the earth, the plant kingdom is very, very thin. But we live in that plant kingdom. So the relationship between the mineral kingdom that nurtures us in our food, we live in that plant kingdom, and inside that plant kingdom, yes, the animal kingdom resides there as well. And we all, in some form or another, we live and feed off of that plant kingdom. The plant kingdom has a lot to do, obviously, with food, shelter, medicine, many things about the plant kingdom that are just nutritious in some ways. We also realize there are dangerous plants like there are dangerous animals, so we have to learn to have some degree of discernment about the plant kingdom. Now, all of this metaphor, if you will, is all laced together with one thing: water. Water moves through all of this, and eventually any mineral that comes into the plant kingdom utilizes water. There are many minerals that don't come into the plant kingdom very often, like, for example, sapphires and diamonds. Well, basically, they're created in the very deep earth, volcanic functions. Other ones, they come out more often, but then they are also consumed by the animal kingdom. So this is a very important sequence. This sequence is also a cognitive one that has to do with mind and feeling, because the very first feeling is the individualization of you entering into your genetic biological family. That biological family is also surrounded by other biological families, and we call that first layer of this the community. So the family and the community are interfaced. All of us in the community, we're interfaced with the principles of nature all around us. And how I am with my family is often revealed with how I am in my community. Now, this same relationship between the mineral kingdom and the plant kingdom, the family and the community, has a series of gates to it. I know it's unusual to think of there being gates, and I've given you these gates before: self, others, and all. Later on, you see this light blue and pink and white band beyond it and around it, and this is the spiritual dimension that also permeates all of this. In the southern hemisphere, the way that water is, if I may just give a different image, the way that water is in the northern hemisphere, it's the same way in the southern hemisphere. It just has different principles at different times. The southern hemisphere is in the very first week of what we call the 3-boy month. Northern hemisphere, 3-girl. Southern hemisphere, 3-boy. We're at a 3. Now that 3 just happens to be the solar plexus. And you know the rest of the numbers. 4 is in the chest, 5 is in the throat, 6 is in the head, 1 and 2 are down below. So the solar plexus is that essential gate that opens, if it is to be opened, the 4 and the 5 and the 6. Solar plexus. You and I will be honoring, dealing with, and eventually hoping to master the elements of the solar plexus for a long time. On one side, the left side, you deal with the pointedness, and that's the pancreatic function. And on the other side, you deal with the liver function, and yes, all the other spleen, stomach functions are all right there too, but I'm just using these two basic opposites. This is the nature of the 3. In the southern hemisphere, this very gentle blade of grass represents the soft, alert expression of one boy. That was the very first month of winter. The water, in its degrees of magnitude, represents the 2-girl function, his wife. All that means is that your mother's father, blade of grass, he is married to your mother's mother, the 2-girl water. The first 3 months of autumn are the 2-girl month, the 4-girl month, and the 6-girl month. The 6-girl month, I know, hang in there. Your mother's father, his mother, is 6-girl. Your mother's father's mother gave birth to your mother's father. I know that's obvious, but these are parts of the gates that we can become more aware of to create this fluidity of water, which corresponds to spirit and corresponds to the capacity to increase our capacity to feel. So on the mother side, in the southern hemisphere, you're actually in the 2nd month of winter. And that has to do with the clarity and the pursuit of truth. This pointedness gives you the capacity to point your attention in any particular direction. This function is your alertness, your awareness. Now, this awareness has an intellectual, perceptual awareness that deals with egoic functions, vibrations, eyesight, and senses. Very important that we use this instrument correctly, because this same instrument is connected into higher principles of awareness that extend into the suprasensory or extrasensory dimensions, clairvoyance, clairaudience, clairsentience, and the ability to see, discover, feel, and realize. Yes, so this aware alertness. Behind this, if you could see all of that dark stuff in the back, you might consider that to be the silence. So in the southern hemisphere, alert, feeling, increase of awareness. This incisiveness gives you the capacity to point your awareness like almost where you want to have a watering hose in your garden. You can point your ability to feed or water the different parts of you. That's why the winter months, they're really about feeding your roots. Because in the winter months, yeah, it can be colder outside, but on the inside, below the ground, in the roots, things are very, very active. They're preparing the plant kingdom to be able to receive the minerals that the plant kingdom will receive in the spring and summer. Southern hemisphere. In the northern hemisphere, it's preparing you to do something that I like that looks a bit more like this. It's preparing you to do the 1-girl, the 3-girl, and the 5-girl. What I mean by that is it's planning in the first month of summer. It is called the 1-girl month. Now, I know these terms take a little while to get used to, but the 1-girl month has to do with your father's mother's position. The 1-girl position is also your bones. The 1-girl position, bones, mineral kingdom. It's also that part of you that is stronger than bone. Because bone one day, even if it's thousands or millions of years later, that bone will dissolve. What will not dissolve is your actual existence. Because the 1-girl principle has to do with that part of you which is eternal and immortal. The body is mortal. We know that. It has a finite limit to its expandability or survivability as a physiological instrument. But this very same location corresponds to your will. Now, this kind of will in the bones is a very important part because it has a lot to do with your instinctual habitation of your own constitution. By that I mean that when you came in the world, you, by whatever miraculous orientation, there was a decision made for you to occupy a specific biological family. That specific biological family gives you the capacity to be able to occupy a constitution. But that constitution is a reflection of two things: your biological constitution, but it's also a reflection of your spiritual constitution. That spiritual constitution, it can grow, but it cannot die. So the experience of being able to look at your number one girl function gives you the capacity to be able to recognize that this function of you, the one girl function, keeps your heart beating, your lungs breathing, keeps everything functioning for you in the background. It's a very important place because, like the bones, it has very long-term memory. But it also is a brain. I'm saying that the bones, no, not the bones or the brain, but rather the very first element of your belly has a function like a brain. Then you have another brain in the chest and another brain in the head, but we won't go into the three brain principle just right now. I'm saying that this very first week of three girl is a transition from the bone into the nerves and into the ligaments. So the elements that hold everything together, oh, if I have a good picture in here, I still like this one, but we can use a different one for a moment. This innermost function of the iris has to do with your will. You're one girl, then there's a gate. When that gate opens up, you're moving into the greater constitutional pattern of your own iris. So there are these gates. One gate, second gate, third gate moves outward. So I'm suggesting to you that this very first week of the three girl month is when you can consciously connect your one girl into your three girl. Pause for a moment. Let me give you a little bit of a easier way to get it. I know it's a lot. Enjoy the radiance of your bones. Enjoy the individuality of the different forms of minerals. Those minerals, and by the way, I urge you to study the minerals of the planet Earth. And there are other minerals outside the planet Earth that arrive at times, but these are the primary ones that we have that compose everything in the plant kingdom and the animal kingdom. Get to know the minerals. I think there's roughly 5,000 to 6,000, but that depends on who you talk to scientifically, just to appreciate their existence. Because inside you, you're made of the composite of minerals. But all of the minerals that compose the genetic helix, they're minerals. At each one of the rungs of the genetic ladder, it's held together by a phosphorus molecule, and then all of those minerals are repeating themselves, creating the genetic helix of your constitution. Now, why this is so important is that there is a link between the first and the third. This boundary between one girl and three girl is sacred, and it is the relationship between two women. Later on in the Southern Hemisphere, we could talk about the relationship between two men in the Southern Hemisphere, the one boy, the three boy, but for this moment, I want to focus on the Northern Hemisphere's relationship of one girl to three girl. To give you an idea of that, I'm going to give you a different graphic for a second. This is the relationship of father's family, the red, mother's family in the blue, This is your father. This is your father's mother. Now, strangely enough, your father's mother married your father's father. Yeah, I know that's obvious. They had sex somewhere along the way, or you wouldn't be here, right? But father's father also has a mother. Father's mother is called the three. That's the three girl. Father's mother is the one, the first month of summer, the second month of summer, and then the third month of summer is father's mother's mother. Phew. Consider that for a moment. The primary place I want to say that you can create a connection is to create the likelihood of a connection that probably didn't exist or likely could exist if you put it there. What do I mean by that? There are many times that this is called one of the most difficult places in the entire family. Why? It's the mother-in-law. Your father's mother has a relationship with her daughter-in-law, your father's mother. This little place right here is oftentimes broken or extremely fragile or doesn't work very well. This regulates the dynamic principles of three girl. Now, why is three girl so important? The three girl presence has to do with your physiology. Your ability to be biologically in the world is related to your three girl. Yeah. So your ability to occupy your body has to do with how well you feel about your father's mother. But even in your ability to want to extend your attention and feeling, appreciation, to the second month of summer, I would suggest that you practice linking the reality that the reality is your mineral kingdom is connected to your physiology. And the mineral kingdom is connected to your food and to your medicine. Now, this link between these two, I'm pretty sure you're the only ones that can repair it. You're the only one who has the direct emotional capacity to connect to your own will and use that will to increase the fluidity between the mother and the father on your father's side, and then between your number one girl to your number three girl. Why? Because this represents regeneration. The regeneration function takes the memory of the one girl and generates it. So if the one girl has a history, your father's mother has a history of difficulty with her mother-in-law, it takes the information and it twists and turns it, and it produces a difficulty physiologically, mentally, or socially. So it begins the process of creating your law of attraction. The law of attraction will bring back to you whatever your number one girl is storing. So if there is an unresolved memory, which, by the way, there are tens of thousands of them, there's not like a maybe, there's 1 or 2 or 10. There may be actually millions of them, because we have all of these tiny little emotional issues and they're stored inside of us. And then whatever's stored is given over to the three girl to manifest physiologically. So if there's a problem in the one girl, it becomes a symptom in the 3-girl. But even if the good things of your constitution are trying to manifest from 1-girl bone into 3-girl, but there's a broken relationship between mother-in-law and daughter-in-law, it makes it very difficult for these two to cooperate with each other to produce well-being, health, and happiness. I mean, if your body cannot assimilate the food or minerals that are provided, it uses those undigested or unutilized minerals to produce, oxidants in the body. It produces poisons in the body. So there's a need to be able to circulate this. And later on in the 5-girl month, there's a need to change it, circulate it, heal it, lymphatic it, remove it, clean it. So later on, the ability for the minerals to be clearly assimilated and circulated, this gap between the mother-in-law and the daughter-in-law is utterly important. Now, I know that sounds like a lot of detail, and you might think of it as being obscure, but I can assure you it's not obscure. It's well known. In most parts of the world, the mother-in-law is vilified many times. And oftentimes, the mother-in-law has a difficult time letting go of her son. Oh, you're not good enough for my baby boy. How many mothers have a tendency to hang on to their sons, particularly if it's a number 1 son and very dear to mother, and he's going to go off and marry some other girl? A man shall leave his mother. That's the symbol, by the way, of the wedding veil. Until a man lifts that veil of his wife is closed, which means that the actual interface between husband and wife cannot occur to its optimum level without the ritual process of a community acknowledging the wedding veil has been lifted. But even after the wedding veil has been lifted by ritual, which is the primary way of lifting the wedding veil, if the mother-in-law still controls, antagonizes, I have to share with you, I read something on my Flipboard the other day of a mother-in-law who was present at her daughter-in-law giving birth. But the daughter-in-law had already named the baby that was arriving because they knew the gender. While the daughter-in-law was under anesthesia, the mother-in-law went and changed the name so that when the baby was born, it would have legally the name that the mother-in-law put on the birth certificate signed by the doctor. Wow. I'm not saying all mother-in-laws are going to do that, but a lot of mother-in-laws do that, not by writing something down, but by having private attitudes about their daughter-in-law. Some mother-in-laws think, well, no, I don't go over there. I just don't get involved. I'm very cooperative. But privately, they have this emotionally dependent relationship to their son who calls them every day or whatever, even if they don't call. Removing this influence of the mother-in-law is something we have to do with our own energy. I know it's weird, but you need to remove, ideally, the unloving influence from 4 different mother-in-law positions. I'm only referring to one. So this wasn't really intended to be one about mother-in-laws, but we need to go into it a little bit more thoroughly one time. But I'm suggesting one of the places to start is on the very first week, all the way through the month, by the way, but particularly between the first and the third week of the second month of summer. because now we are officially, as of this recording, we're on the very first week of summer in the Northern Hemisphere, and this link between one girl and three girl remains for you to be the one to make the connection. Because I can assure you, whatever you might have heard about your mother-in-law's relationship to your mother and all around you, it was probably not as good as you might imagine. I'm not saying they're all terrible, but I would say probably, well, maybe 98% of them are, but you can decide yours is an exception to that, but I would go ahead and do it anyway. What does it look like? Well, go here. Feel the water. Remember the 2 girl, the 4 girl, the 6 girl. Remember the innocence of 1 boy, 3 boy, 5 boy. Bring them all to have a quiet little party where your mother-in-laws get together. It doesn't matter whether they've passed or not. Your opportunity is to go to that place and repair the damage that exists there, even if you don't believe there's ever been any damage. I can assure you there's far more damage than you might imagine. But you're the primary medicine. Your alertness, your feeling, your water. You can use metaphors of mineral and plant and feeding, but you can see 2 women coming together with you in the middle. I would suggest you put your one grandmother on the other side and on the other arm, and get the 2 of them together, and then the 3 of you, your father's mother and your father's father's mother, you get them together and you just give them a little imaginary thank you, appreciation, openness, change, metamorphosis, forgiveness, asking for divine help. I know it's a little odd, but I really recommend it. Do your best. Just do your best. If you have a question or 2, come back and ask. I'll do my best to answer. Good luck. See you soon.